I'm the Tim Chappell, and you are listening to the Stay Great podcast. I want you to think about the most important responsibility that a leader might have. Pause the podcast here for just a sec and take a minute to think about it. Now, today I'm going to read from a chapter called The Ultimate Dichotomy from Jocko Willink's and Leif Babin's book called The Dichotomy of Leadership. Jocko and Leif have served as Navy SEAL commanders and now have a leadership consultancy called Echelon Front since they've moved from military service into the private sector. So you can also listen to the Jocko podcast. There's a ton of value from that podcast as well. So anyways, this book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, is the absolute number one recommendation that I give people when they ask me what books they should read on leadership or ask me what my favorite book is. It's this. No contest. There are definitely other good books on leadership that are in my top 5 for sure, but this book sits at number 1, just uncontested. I will always go back and reference this book. So let's hear about what Jocko calls the ultimate dichotomy. Being in charge fell short of explaining the way I felt about these men, all of them. They were my friends because I joked and laughed and carried on with them. They were my brothers because we shared the common bond of our fraternal order. They were also like my children because I was responsible for what they did, good and bad, and it was my job to protect them to the best of my ability. I had to overwatch them as they overwatched the city from rooftops and moved through the violent streets. They gave me everything they had, at work, in training, and now on the battlefield. In turn, they were everything to me. In ways, I was closer to them than I was my own parents, my siblings, even my wife and actual children. Of course I loved my family, but the men in this task unit were also my family, and I wanted nothing more than to take care of them. But as much as I wanted to protect them, we had a job to do. A job that was violent and dangerous and unforgiving. A job that required me to put them at risk, tremendous risk, over and over and over again. This was an example of the dichotomy of leadership, perhaps the ultimate dichotomy of leadership that a combat leader must face. It's a combat leader's duty to care about his troops more than anything else in the world, and yet, at the same time, a leader must accomplish the mission. That means the leader must make decisions and execute plans and strategies that might cost the men he loves so much their very lives. And this was incredibly difficult for me, because in Ramadi, it wasn't a matter of if we would lose someone, it was a matter of when. Wow, so that's how Jocko kind of leads off with this book in the first chapter. Some powerful stuff. Now, I have not served in any military capacity, but I respect our servicemen and women so much because they put their lives on the line every day and deal with this level of stress and pressure. Now, Jocko said here the ultimate dichotomy. Let me read that back to you here for a second. This was the ultimate dichotomy of leadership, perhaps the ultimate dichotomy of leadership that a combat leader must face. It is a combat leader's duty to care about his troops more than anything else in the world, and yet, at the same time, a leader must accomplish the mission. That means the leader must make decisions and execute plans and strategies that might cost the men he loves so much their very lives. So caring for the troops and yet at the same time accomplishing a mission. So you do some thinking on your own real quick here. Have you ever had to face this dichotomy before? Probably not to that extreme, but is there a time when you've had to take care of your troops, your subordinate leaders, your employees, anything like that, and at the same time you need to also accomplish a mission, hit goals, get a certain metric, whatever it is, hit some key performance indicators? We'll take a look at what this dichotomy may look like in the business world a little bit later on in this episode, but this next little excerpt that follows up just what I read from the book here is a conversation that Jocko has with one of his platoon commanders, and it's really good. I'm going to go ahead to the book here real quick. I feel like it's my fault that Mikey died. I feel responsible, Seth told me with tears in his eyes. I thought about it for a moment, and then I told him the truth. We are responsible. I paused for a moment. Seth didn't say a word. He was surprised by what I had said. We are responsible, I said again. It was our strategy. We came up with it. We knew the risks. You planned the missions. I approved them. We were the leaders. And we are responsible for everything that happened during that deployment. Everything. That's the way it is. We can't escape that. That's what being a leader is. I looked at Seth. It was clear that his heart was broken. Both Leif and Seth, as tough as they were on the battlefield, as determined as they were to accomplish their missions, as aggressive as they were in pursuit of the enemy, cared for and loved their guys more than anything else in the world. They could have given anything. They would have given anything to trade places with their fallen men. Anything. But that wasn't an option. That isn't the way the world works. And now here they both were, dealing with the aftermath of the ultimate dichotomy of leadership. As much as you care about your men, as a leader, you have to do your duty. You have to accomplish the mission. And that involves risk. And it could very well cost people's lives. Now, again, that's heavy stuff, and thankfully I haven't had my leadership tested at that level of stress. Care about your men and accomplish the mission. That's a leader obviously has to do both to some varying degree, and balancing that dichotomy. And what I like about this book here and how it's written, not only the concept of balancing a dichotomy, but each chapter is written in this great format. So there's a war story, or what we civilians might call, like a case study or a narrative, as the first part of the chapter. It starts off with something that happened to Jocko and Leif while they were serving in Iraq, and then they break down the principle of that story that we can take from the experience. And then the third section of each chapter is called Application to Business. Since not all of us fully understand what it's like to serve in the military, it's geniusly written and makes it great for me to understand these great lessons, even though I am a private citizen. So well done to the authors for constructing and writing the book like that. To close out this section, or to close out that section in this chapter, Jocko talks about a few more dichotomies that he goes over in the book. So I highly recommend you order it and read the entire thing, do what I do, and highlight what stands out to you so that you can go back and reference all of the great takeaways that are in here. But here's an important section with a few other dichotomies that Jocko kind of talks about a little bit later on in the book. Just as he had in Ramadi, time and time again, Seth stepped forward. He stepped up. He shouldered the heavy burden of command once more, to struggle with the opposing forces that make up the countless dichotomies of leadership, to balance being a leader and being a follower, being confident but not cocky, to be aggressive but still cautious, to be bold but at the same time thoughtful. And most significant, he chose to face the ultimate dichotomy, to train, work with, and develop a team of friends and brothers to care about those men more than anything in the world, and then lead those men on missions that could get them killed. That is the burden. That is the challenge. That is the dichotomy. That is leadership. Boom. Enough said right there. You can go ahead and turn the podcast off now. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. There's still plenty of wisdom in here that I'm going to go over just from this one chapter. Again, this is just one chapter, and that was alone just taken from the first section of this chapter, where Jocko talks about an example of what he's experienced. And so now I'm going to read a little bit of the principle section of this chapter. I believe this one paragraph really right here could summarize the entire chapter. This is the real golden nugget of this book. But like I said, you should order it and read the whole thing, get the full value out of it. So here's the principle from the chapter called Balancing the Ultimate Dichotomy. There are limitless dichotomies in leadership. and a leader must carefully balance between these opposite forces. But none are as difficult as this: to care deeply for each individual member of the team, while at the same time accepting the risks necessary to accomplish the mission. A good leader builds powerful, strong relationships with his or her subordinates. But while that leader would do anything for those team members, the leader must also recognize there is a job to do. And that job might put the very people the leader cares about at risk. There are limitless dichotomies in leadership. Very, very true. Now, I've read this book. I know this to be true because now my mindset is to look for these dichotomies, and I see them in so many aspects of my life. Now, the most important one being taking care of people and accomplishing a mission. Let me tell you, it is tough to balance those two sometimes, those opposing forces maybe. Me personally, I really do have a heart for people, but sometimes because of this flaw of mine, I will kind of default to prioritizing accomplishing a mission, or for me, achieving a task more than actually prioritizing people. So I got to keep that in check. I am clearly not a perfect man, and so I keep that in check. I need to work on that and balance out that dichotomy just always, being the ultimate dichotomy. So what about you? Ask yourself, kind of reflect a little bit. Are you generally more concerned about taking care of your people or about accomplishing the mission or task at hand? Just something to think about. Y'all know how much I love to self-reflect, and I encourage others to do it too as we go through these in the podcast. So now in the application to business section, this really resonates with me because it may be a scenario that I face in the future, but I'm praying that I never have to make a call like this. Stay connected with me and find out, I suppose. But let me read this last little excerpt that I'm going to share with you for this episode really quick. "The numbers don't tell the whole story," the regional manager declared. "Of course they don't," I responded. "But the numbers tell the part of the story that pays the bills." "There's more to it than that," he replied, clearly frustrated. "I know there is," I told him, trying to be empathetic. "Do you?" he responded aggressively. I decided that I needed to put him in check. "Yes," I told him fairly. "Yes, I absolutely know." The regional manager sat there looking at me, slightly surprised at my tone, as I was now claimed to understand his business. But it wasn't his business I was claiming to know. It was the situation he was facing as a leader. "I know there are lots of people out there," I said. "Lots of people who depend on you to make the right decisions. Decisions that determine if they will continue to have a job or not. Decisions that determine if they can pay their mortgage and put food on the table for their families. Those are heavy decisions, and those are hard decisions. I've been there. I've had people's lives hinging upon decisions that I've made, on the missions that we did, on the areas that we went into, on who I assigned to do what. I sent my men, my friends, my brothers into harm's way over and over and over again, and the outcome was not always good." The regional manager was now listening, really listening to me for the first time. I had finally connected with him. "Look," I continued, "you are the leader, and that comes with a heavy burden. In the military, we call it the burden of command. It is the responsibility you feel for the lives of the people who work for you. In the SEAL teams, I was dealing with lives. Here, you're dealing with people's livelihoods. It isn't the exact same thing, but it's close. People are counting on you to keep their paychecks coming so they can feed their families. And you care about these people, just as you should. Just like I cared about my men. They were everything to me. They still are. That is one of the most difficult dichotomies of leadership." "What is?" the regional manager asked. "The fact that you care about your people more than anything, but at the same time, you have to lead them. And as a leader, you might have to make decisions that hurt individuals on your team, but you also have to make decisions that will allow you to continue the mission for the greater good of everyone on the team. You've done everything you can to save jobs, but the work isn't there. It just isn't. You've been struggling for 8 months. How many employees did you transfer from the mine that closed?" I asked him. 147 people, the regional manager answered. And how many people did you employ at the other 5 mines prior to that transfer? I asked. About 600, he said. So, in an effort to try to save the jobs of 147 employees, I noted you are putting at risk the other 5 mines and 600 jobs, the entire mission, if you don't make some hard decisions. That is exactly what will happen. The regional manager sat quietly. It was sinking in. I could see it in his eyes. But I don't know. I don't know if I can do it, he said soberly. Some of these folks are like family to me. Well, let me tell you this, I replied. If you don't step up and lead, what do you think corporate will do? They'll either shut us down or, he trailed off, not wanting to admit the other obvious possibility. Or what? I asked. Or get rid of me, he replied. Exactly, I agreed. Now, what would be better for everyone here? To get shut down completely? Or to have somebody else who doesn't care as much for the team as you do come in, take over, and drive down costs by chopping the staff to the extreme? I know it's hard. I know. But if you don't do what you need to do, what you know you need to do, you aren't helping anyone. And you definitely aren't leading. In fact, just the opposite. If you don't make the hard decision, you will be hurting the people you care about, not helping them. That's another dichotomy. In order to help your team, sometimes you have to hurt them. Just like a doctor performing a surgery. Surgery is a brutal thing. Cutting open a body and removing parts from it, then sewing it back together. But in order to save a life, a surgeon has to do just that. What you have to do here is also brutal. I get it. But failure to do it is going to have far more brutal consequences. The regional manager was nodding. He understood. He was a good-hearted leader who cared for his people, an admirable and important quality in a leader. But he had strayed too far and unbalanced the dichotomy by caring more about his people than he did about the mission. He lost sight of what was most important strategically. To protect some employees, he had placed his entire mission and every other employee at risk. Now he understood that doing so was a failure of leadership. Once he acknowledged this, he could then course correct and rebalance the dichotomy. He had to make the tough decisions. He didn't like it, but he understood. Over the next 2 weeks, the regional manager let go of almost 80 people. He didn't like it, but he had to do it. He had to lead. The cost savings moved the mines from the red into the black. They were profitable once again and on a sustainable path for the foreseeable future. The regional manager now understood this most difficult dichotomy of leadership. A leader must care about the troops, but at the same time, the leader must complete the mission, and in doing so, there will be risks and sometimes unavoidable consequences to the troops. The regional manager now realized that he had to balance caring for his people with accomplishing the mission, and that failing to balance those two opposing goals would result in his failure to do either. Nobody ever said that leadership would be easy. Making decisions like that fall on the leader and are a heavy burden. What Jocko and what he called in the SEAL teams, the burden of command, being entrusted with both people's livelihood and accomplishing a mission or hitting a goal can be stressful and be a lot for an individual. It can weigh a lot on your heart. I've had to make that call to a small degree before, and it's difficult because I do care about people, and sometimes life may seem unfair, but we are charged with the responsibility of accomplishing that mission. And sometimes some not so great things have to happen to those troops. And that is the ultimate dichotomy that we need to balance as leaders. Take care of our troops and accomplish missions. Now, I read a lot from this book, but only read about 5% here in today's episode. So again, I'll do one last promotion for it. I highly encourage you to get this book, The Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and just see if it applies to your life. Now, I guarantee you that it does. There's just no way that it doesn't, because we all face balancing at least one of these dichotomies every day, whether you have a formal leadership role, an official leadership title or whatnot. Every person faces at least one of these dichotomies every day in our interactions with others, or however we operate throughout the day. So get the whole book, read it, go back and reference it when you need to. Today's unpaid ad is for Jocko Fuel. Yes, not only does Jocko write books, he also has created a healthy energy drink. I'm drinking one right now. It's delicious. It's the blue raspberry flavor. I also like the mango flavored drink. Shout out to my man Echo Charles for coming up with that one. So like I mentioned, these are healthy energy drinks. No sugar, no crash. They're keto. All good stuff in your body, like electrolytes, amino acids, nootropics. And they're just freaking delicious. When people ask me how I can achieve a lot of things and get a lot of work done, it's because more than likely I'm having at least one of these a day, if not just to stay awake. Right before a workout is great, as I'm kind of warming up, maybe walking there on the treadmill. I'll drink one of these energy drinks, and it's just delicious. So those are a huge factor in all of that. So you can go to jockofuel.com and get some healthy and delicious energy drinks. Highly recommend those. Make sure you're connecting with us. We are on X at the SG Podcast. You can find these episodes on Facebook, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Make sure you're helping us out. We appreciate it when you subscribe, because then we know that the value is getting passed on to you, and it helps us in the algorithms and whatnot. So please leave us a 5-star review. My mom always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. You can just listen to another podcast. It's cool. You're not going to hurt my feelings. We enjoy recording and producing this show. We aren't doing it for money or for sponsorships. That's why we have the unpaid ads, just because I think they're kind of a fun thing to do. We do it just because we love y'all and want to see you all be amazing leaders who achieve great things. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Tim Chappell. And a thank you goes out to Black Comet for producing this episode. My producer handles all the technological stuff so that I don't have to spend what would take years editing and putting together just one episode. He takes care of all that, so thank you. And everybody out there listening, it's important for us to balance these dichotomies that are presented in the dichotomy of leadership here. We're to balance the two opposing forces that we face in our everyday lives. So, make sure that you understand these dichotomies, stay great, and take care of each other.